member value, non-dues revenue, and new association business models. So associations are under constant pressure to offer increasing member value while also creating additional revenue. Yet the association business model is being significantly challenged. We have a tough economy, has taken its toll on membership revenues. Younger prospective members are not joiners for life with the loyalty of previous generations. And conventional revenue is no longer reliable. So today we have CSAE Griner Award recipient Randall Craig to share new thinking on association business models. I'll tell you a little bit about Randall, then we'll jump into Q&A. He's founded several successful startups. He's held a long-time position at a Big Four consulting firm, was a senior executive at an American public company, author of 8 books in the Speaker Hall of Fame. He's worked with I don't know how many hundred associations, so many, as speaker and as advisor. And he works with me at the Brain Trust Professional Institute, helping organizations grow their businesses. So for our live audience today, usually we start off with Randall giving a few thoughts to get us thinking, and then we'll flip into Q&A. And if you have any questions at any time, feel free to type it in the chat or put your little Zoom hand up or come on mic. Happy to hear your questions. I can read out loud from the chat. Over to you, Randall.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for coming. Really, today is, I call it, associations at a crossroads. And not all of this is going to really, be applicable for every little association. So my goal is really to say, hey, let's set the stage here and let's talk about some new ideas. And guess what? I've got a few as to how to sort of solve the issue. And, I think people realize that, the association sector, in a certain sense, is almost at a bit of an existential crisis. COVID has certainly made it worse, and it's almost accelerated some of the problems. I think that most people who are listening to this kind of understand it, but just the idea of saying, can we dig faster to sort of rewind the clock to the before times is not realistic. There's been a whole ton of changes. There's socioeconomic changes. Social media is building community, independent of the association. Meetups, not connected to the association, seem to have a life of their own. Education provided by associations in other jurisdictions are wicking off a segment of membership and impacting education revenue. And individual thought leaders and actually places like the Brain Trust Professional Institute are providing excellent professional development directly. And of course, during COVID, there's a whole bunch of other things going on. A lot of membership organizations saw their numbers decline, and the associated revenue for that decline. And without an annual trade show conference, guess what? All the sponsorship revenue that dried up, and for a lot of organizations, that was kind of like the big shot of oxygen, cash, that helped power the organization to allow it to invest in some of the things that were very important and strategic. And then there's another shift that's actually happening. I don't think this should be a surprise to most people as well. Today's younger members, they're not joiners. If we think about the heyday of the membership organizations, well, think about service clubs. The Elks and the Moose Lodges and the Rotarians and the co-ops, all these different ones there. In one day, way in the past, everybody was a member. In the professional scheme, people realize there's some things that we can do together at an association that we can't do by ourselves. So people join. Younger people today, not so much so. And many organizations are saying, well, do we really need to pay for everybody to be a member of that organization, right? So it's a big challenge. And as I said, COVID has helped sort of accelerate some of that. And the more astute boards are realizing, okay, we've got to do something different. We've seen some, for example, associations where the provincial or state groups suddenly said, hey, we don't need to be supporting all these other regions. We'll just sort of become our own. And people who want our critical mass will join us and forget about all the others. There's all kinds of things. My question is, what can we do about it? And today, I've got a bunch of ideas that how do we slow the attrition? How do we improve retention and everything? But I think most people have kind of seen that and, done that. So we've also got a couple other new ideas that maybe you hadn't thought about, having to do with the business model. And maybe there should be some sort of change to that. Or the question about how do we use non-traditional revenue sources and partnerships actually make a difference as well. So, I'd like to, hand it back to you, Rania, and the whole group, and we could start taking questions. And I'm sure if the group doesn't have lots, Rania, you probably have a ton of them.
Yeah.
And let's just see where it goes.
I always brainstorm lots of gotcha questions to try to stump Randall. You guys get priority if ever you have any questions. Feel free again to put it in the chat or come on mic, but I'll get us started. Randall, you wrote a rousing white paper about the association industry called Associations at a Crossroad, but it was published and circulated several years ago. If any of our listeners or watchers wanted, I'm happy to send you a copy. At this time, the challenges associations face are very well known, very well, talked about. We see transformation, innovation all around us, and yet how is it that we aren't seeing more significant change for associations?
Oh boy, that's actually a tough question, but it's not so surprising. First of all, since I first wrote the white paper 2 years ago, and it caused a bit of a kerfuffle because it was kind of um, some different thoughts, let's just say, in it, and we can explore that. But it's been updated a few times since because times do change. With respect to the core of your question, though, Rania, there's different types of boards that run associations, professional organizations. There's ones that are incredibly strategic, totally understand governance, are very set up to deal with strategic change, are trying to get ahead of the curve. And those particular associations, for the most part, they will find their way forward and everything. Then there's the smallest associations where the board members, there is not any degree of, people don't know how to be board members. There isn't a governance function that's really deeply embedded. The skill sets of the board members and the membership, for that matter, might not be so sophisticated. They might be expert at whatever their professional knowledge is, but they might not be expert in governance and strategy and some of the other things. So some organizations are highly driven by their staff team, the executive director and their team, or an association management company, where really it's a question of making sure things work efficiently and focusing on the day-to-day. And oh my God, since COVID and the budget contractions and everything, it's how you do more and more and more with less and less and less. So that innovation, certainly at a business model level, in many associations, it's hard to bubble that up from the executive director, their staff, their association management companies. And finally, the non-board volunteers, they're everyone's got their day job, right? And the ideas might not come from there either. I think the reason why there hasn't been the change and there hasn't been a focus on this is because there's a huge issue of how do we keep the lights on, right? And coupled with sometimes a lack of sophistication and governance, and certainly thinking outside the box, strategic planning, being aware of what the weak signals are in the marketplace, making sure that you try and have your mind and the group mind focused on whatever happens to be new. For example, a number of years ago with social media. Oh, we got to do social media. Oh, we got to engage with them. Oh, even before that was the web. Oh, we got to have a website. Today's AI. Well, we got to do AI, right? Well, there's only so much time actually that's available for doing all the new while you're still doing the day-to-day, and so this is a challenge. So we find people in the association who are employed by the associations being squeezed. They're working incredibly, like sometimes atrocious hours, just because they feel so strongly, right? Volunteers who are putting in huge number of hours as well, just to keep the enterprise moving along, etc. But not everybody is skilled up in what might be necessary to say, okay, how do we deal with the issues that we talked about just at the very top of the podcast?
I want to talk about the difference between member-driven associations versus your mission-driven associations. Okay, we often hear associations self-describe proudly as we are member-driven, And for the sake of clarity, member-driven associations are focused on pursuing and forwarding what benefits their members, versus mission-driven. They're focused on their mission or whatever cause they're supporting. When we think about member churn, who is more and less likely to renew? Is it the member of a member-driven association asking, what has my association done for me? Or is it the member of a mission-driven association saying, what have I done for my association's mission? And do you have any thoughts on, to drive member engagement, like where should the focus be? On the member, on the cause, or perhaps elsewhere?
So it's actually a huge spectrum, because on the far side of mission-driven organizations are registered charities, for a particular, health, Canadian Cancer Society, right? Like there's a million different, charities. On the other side, there's the mandatory membership organizations for regulated professions, the medical associations for doctors, for example, right? And so the question of how do you build engagement is interesting, because even the ones that are just voluntary membership professional associations typically have an advocacy arm, and they do have a mission to make stuff safer, okay, or to make sure people are healthier, or to something that's a little bit more altruistic than just let's kind of like feather our members' beds, if you want to be crass about it, right? But I think that the fallout, though, is sometimes members don't understand the connection between the advocacy efforts and the mission-oriented activities of the organization, and why it's actually important to them. And in a certain sense, you could have a vicious cycle or a very positive cycle if you actually wire those two together. If people realize that the advocacy efforts and the mission-oriented activities that happen at a higher level, if they're able to see what a difference it will make over the medium and long term for them as individuals, then they'll say, oh, that's a good thing. There's value to me in that. And by the way, sign me up. I'm going to volunteer on that. I'm going to put a little bit of my time into that advocacy effort, whether it's just commenting on social posts or showing up or volunteering for government meetings or with regulators or whatever it happens to be, right? So the more people are personally engaged in it, the more effective that mission will be. The more effective the mission will be, the more people will, as long as that communication linkage is there, we'll say, oh, that's actually important. I've certainly seen associations where advocacy is clearly important to the future of the association, to the profession, but there hasn't been the greatest job in terms of wiring the why for that back to the actual members. And I think that's a certain, interesting, task. The problem's been solved before, communication, but I think that we could do better, and you'll see a connection. In terms of retention of members, well, I think part of that might be generational. I think part of that might be, the companies who may have paid for these things in the past saying, well, what's the benefit to us as an organization if we've got our staff members spending some of their time on industry-related projects as opposed to, so why should we pay for it? Sometimes it's the individuals who are saying, listen, if I need something, I'm just going to step in. And if I step in, I'll get some benefit there. And if it's not interesting to me, I'll just grow further away, and I'm going to just skip it altogether. I'm going to disengage. I'm not going to renew. And by the way, if you're thinking about mandatory membership organizations, don't kid yourself. Who wants a membership in a mandatory membership organization where people don't like the fact that they are being told that they must be a member of that organization? Surely, if you deal with the issue of member value and member engagement, so at the highest possible level, even in a mandatory membership organization, if people see that huge value, they'll say, yeah, this actually makes sense for me to be a member. I don't mind actually sending that check in, even though somebody's telling me I have to. So very lengthy answer to that question, but I think it's an important one.
I want to talk about the raison d'être for an association, okay? So we're talking about non-dues revenue. Taking a step back, why are we talking about non-dues revenue? Okay, to be sustainable, we want to diversify our revenue so that if membership dips, like during COVID, we all saw that, you have other avenues, you know, to get revenue. But this begs the question, like if the raison d'être for an association is for the members to associate, and we're relying on products and services to drive revenue, how are we not a business that sells products and services?
Yeah, so I've spoken to many board members, executive directors, association management companies over the years who say, um, we're not a business here. We're a professional association who exists for the purpose of having our members be able to do things together that they cannot do by themselves. We've got a role to play in the country in terms of making sure our profession is whatever, and on it goes. And then, thank you very much, around the corner, have the conversation where they say, you know something, we used to think of ourselves not as businesses, but you know something, perhaps let's close us off to some of the possibility that we can learn from the business. So, for example, we now know about what budgets are. Guess what? That's a business concept. It's not like something special, right? Gee, how to treat employees and culture in the organization. Right? Just because some people are members and some people are staff, it doesn't mean that you can't deal with, you still have to manage the volunteers, stuff. Dealing with selling sponsorships or selling trade show booths or selling memberships. Thank you, that's sales. There's a marketing job that happens before that sales. There's a service job that happens after the sale, right? And so, even though some of the language might be different, if having the conversation with that second group of leaders, okay, it's, gee, we got to operate like a business, right? Like a business, right? And then, the pendulum starts to swing way over there. And we kind of forget about the fact that, well, we're, quote, not a business. If you look at our articles of incorporation, our raison d'etre, all that, it's not just a profit motive. In fact, there isn't a profit motive. And in fact, depending on the jurisdiction, you sort of can't have, profits forever. But that doesn't mean that you can't be sustainable. It doesn't mean that you can't pay, for example, your staff. It doesn't mean, for example, if you're having a conference, you can't pay your speakers or your facilitators or any of those other things, because you have to have money. You got to pay rent. You got to pay for that Zoom licenses or for Microsoft Word or PowerPoint. Like, there's expenses here, so we've got to charge for them. So the whole question of, non-dues revenue, the question is, how do you make it so that you can de-risk the sustainability of the organization, so it becomes easier to actually deliver on what the organization's actual mission is? And one is to say, okay, well, we can get more members, we'll get more money that way. Well, we can increase the dollars that we get from dues. Okay, I guess we could do that, but there's a limit, right? And we're bumping against that in a huge way. Gee, we can provide more value add throughout the year and charge for it. And we get more money from that, more program. We could charge for certifications, right? So we're, these are all things that people know and love and everything. We could sell sponsorships. We'll put a sponsorship and affinity programs in. We're going to sell more booths. We're going to have speakers that are actually like vendors, and they're gonna pay to actually have a slot at our conference, right? By the way, most people realize that no one likes that, right? But still, it's another way to get more money, right? But beyond that, aren't there ways to de-risk the financial structure of the organization, right? And you can only cut your costs so much. You can't cut yourself to growth, right? And as you grow, you want to make that the risk of failure is one that's mitigated, right? That the costs don't grow at a greater rate, for example, with greater complexity than your ability to fund it, right? Well, an interesting exercise to play with boards and leadership teams at associations is to say, budget wasn't an issue. If you had unlimited cash, what would you do? How would you be able to better address your mission? If you had unlimited resources, lots and lots of arms and legs. And I'm not talking about outsourcing. I'm talking about great arms and legs who are very competent. You have as many as, what could you do? What would you do? right? If you were able to start up today, there wasn't your association, your organization in the past, and you're starting it just today, what would you actually do? How would you make sure that how you're set up is one that maybe was sustainable in a way that was different than the way you're set up right now? Asking some of these questions, it's amazing what can come out. It's amazing what can come out, which means that there's some opportunity. So I asked that question, between this year and this year, and then said, well, maybe there's something here. Here's the concept. If we said, let's focus on the revenue side of the model for a moment. Okay. And let's focus actually not on us as an association, but let's actually focus on our members and sort of how they sort of do their business. Now, listen, there's associations where there's corporate members. There's associations where there's individual members. There's associations who are employees. There's associations where the individual members are running businesses of their own. So please, I recognize that there's all these different categories, if you will, of members. So ask this, what if every association member, whether individual or an organization, had to do their bookkeeping, accounting, and tax? They do. What if every member had to purchase insurance? They have to do that. What if every member had to purchase raw materials, office supplies? Yeah, they do that. Okay. What if every member had a reserve that they had to keep for, like a financial reserve for a rainy day? Yeah, they got to do that too. We can go down through the list. What else does everyone need? They need legal services, and they need to implement technology, whether that's marketing automation or CRM or ERP or HRIS or whatever it happens to be. They have to recruit new staff. I'm talking about your members. I'm not talking about the association, the organization, right? Every member needs these services, or a subset, or perhaps a few other services, to run their business, to be successful in what they're doing. And for individual, as opposed to corporate, it's likely that the people who are decision makers for purchasing these suite of products are actually members. And so, my question would be, what if the association, which knows their sector better than anybody else, actually provided these services? Okay, in other words, what if the association became a shared service provider to members who decided that they want these services? Now, the concept of shared services has a very, very long history in business, not so much in associations, although there's some associations that are actually doing this. To be clear, I'm not talking about affinity arrangements. So, for example, you might have arranged for a Good Life Fitness or some local fitness deal that members can get 5% off. Or, gee, they can get insurance at a slight discount, and maybe you get a couple dollars from every policy. This is not shared service. It's a sponsorship or a commission arrangement. Shared services go much further. So if you think about all those what if questions that I just asked, what if we flipped it now and said, how might we? How might we as an association provide bookkeeping or accounting services to our members? How might we do their tax? How might we set up an insurance carrier or agency for our members' benefit? How might we set up a buying group? How might we manage our members' reserve funds and other cash balances? How might we provide legal services or advise members on tech strategy? Or how might we implement the tech strategy on their behalf, or provide a cloud-based solution for the entire industry? How might we provide HR services to our members, like from recruitment to policies to consulting to training? Now, obviously, this is the whole gamut of what an organization needs. And your members may need, as a group, only a small number of them. And you might, as an association, may decide that you got to start somewhere, you only start in this area and this area. But the idea of just asking that question suddenly opens up a potential very, very, very exciting future. Okay, there's risks inherent in all of this. Okay, and it may be that at the end there's only one or two that you might decide to do, but consider the impact. Okay, revenues from the shared services could far surpass the cost of the core offerings of education and certification and advocacy and community building and so on. shared service revenues could lead to far more ambitious investments in these core offerings with a significantly higher impact. And just maybe far lower prices for professional development and convention attendance, which is a huge member benefit. Here's another impact. Revenues from shared services could also have a dramatic impact on annual fees. How many members would join your organization if the membership dues were zero? Or if annual membership dues could be used as a credit against the cost of using the shared services? Now, we're not suggesting a criteria for membership itself has changed, just the cost of it. Or perhaps for the first time ever, the organization will have a sustainable business model that is independent of dues or sponsorship revenue. Now, we see the beginning of this already from the creation of MLS systems by real estate boards or co-op insurance programs by a number of different associations that actually own the carrier. And in some cases, where associations provide consulting and advisory services or treasury management services to their members and charge for it. And when that happens, all of a sudden, we could actually see a bit of a difference. I think there's many challenges to the idea, but I haven't seen this conversation, which I think is an important strategic one, actually being discussed, right? It may be an opportunistic, well, what if we did this for our members? That's very different from saying, well, listen, our business model is a shared service model, which then enable us to achieve what our particular vision is.
Randall, do you really think any of that is realistic? Given the current staff, culture, and talent at associations, they already were saying, the mom and pop shoppiness of many associations. The joke is that many associations, the bulk of the staff is theater majors, where you're asking people who already don't have the business acumen, the board isn't stacked with that MBA, whatever, marketing, whatever talent. You're asking them all to step aside and give up their roles for people who are experts in sourcing and procurement and running these. This is a completely different entity needing different brains. On that note, we'll break here on part 1 on our discussion on member value, non-dues revenue, and new association business models. We'll pick up with more Q&A in part 2. And if anything we talked about so far resonates with you, if you're curious about getting a speaker for a conference or for a retreat or business coaching for yourself or to align your team with some training, to reach out, we'd be happy to have a conversation and share resources. You can email us at info@randallcraig.com or book a call at www.randallcraig.net/30, and we'll see you back for part 2.